Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Good friend to the Price of Business is Frank Vernuccio. He's been on several times. He's always stirring up trouble, but I always enjoy what he brings to the program. Frank, welcome as always.
Hey, it's good to be with you this morning.
As always, glad to have you on. Frank, before we get started on our topic, which I think is rather intriguing, tell us a little bit about your company.
I'm the editor-in-chief of the New York Analysis of Policy and Government. Each week, we try to take a level-headed, nonpartisan look at the major issues facing the United States and, in fact, the rest of the world. And we try to do it not from a political or partisan basis, but simply from a pure, factual basis.
Okay, very good. Now say that back 3 times really fast. No. Obviously, you've said that before. Very good. We're always glad to have you on. You got a little bit of an interesting story going about the similarities between New York Yankee, one-time great, now kind of, I don't know how you want to describe him these days, but somewhat of a multiply injured embarrassment, Alex Rodriguez, and Barack Obama. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's amazing the similarities in their backgrounds. I mean, both came from families that were unfortunately broken. Both lived part of their youth overseas, away from the United States. Both were recognized very early on in their lives for having exceptional talent. And both really have had kind of both successful and tragic careers at the same time. The difference between the two men, though, has to do with the way the media has treated both of them. A-Rod's every misstep, in fact, even some actions that weren't even so much as a misstep, but rather just a mistake, have been treated harshly by the press. Not necessarily incorrectly, but harshly nevertheless. On the other hand, we have President Obama, who has had possibly the worst record of any American president in both domestic and foreign affairs. And yet the press continues to laud him as being practically worthy of mounting on Mount Rushmore. So similar careers, similar types of errors, similar mistakes in judgment, but radically different treatment by the media.
Yeah, okay, so you're saying similar. You know, and I'm no defender of Barack Obama. In fact, I couldn't even say that without laughing. But, I mean, how do you say their mistakes are similar? Because it seems like Alex Rodriguez in particular has these real blatantly moral relationship problems over and over again. Plus, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of things that are going on, but kind of help create a bridge of similarity.
Well, and both have been accused of using banned substances, President Obama in his youth and Alex Rodriguez absolutely as part of his career. But again, both have reached the pinnacle, at one point have reached the pinnacle of their respective careers. And both did it through both a great deal of talent personally, but also through a great deal of, shall we say, finessing the law. In the case of Alex Rodriguez, the use of banned substances, we don't know how much it added to his career, but it certainly gave him an edge. In the case of President Obama, an ardent practitioner of the Chicago way, and translated into national politics, we saw in the 2008 election how voter intimidation was taking place in places like Philadelphia. We see in the current election where in Indiana, for example, there were people voting multiple times for the president in key precincts in key states. We see that in terms of the Justice Department. A lot of prosecutions that should have taken place have not taken place. And we can list a whole host of scandals. The use of the Internal Revenue Service for the political intimidation of President Obama's opponents. So, I mean, clearly both have not minded bending the rules to the point of breaking the rules to get where they are today. But again, the treatment is totally different. A-Rod will suffer terribly for his actions. The president continues to be lauded by the press.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. So when you look at that, and of course, obviously the consequences of Obama's bad decisions are far greater than those of A-Rod.
Well, unless, of course, you're a Yankee fan, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, I understand. Diehard sports fans. I understand that. But seriously, though, from a real-world perspective, from what life, where rubber meets the road, the stuff that this administration has done has been unbelievable.
Of course, you're absolutely right. I mean, A-Rod's, life story and his misdeeds and his banishment from baseball for a year and a half are trivial and really of no major consequence whatsoever. On the other hand, if you look at Obama's decisions, both nationally and internationally, they are devastating. We're still facing massive unemployment. We're seeing our alliances overseas weaken. The United States is basically not treated with the respect it once was. And most frightening of all, our military power and our national security has been jeopardized terribly by this administration. And the consequences of that, I think, are so far-reaching and so frightening, it's rather terrible to contemplate.
Yeah, and I mean, you literally have you literally have the United States running around like a dog with his tail between his legs now internationally. When you see all of these embassies closed, we can't even guarantee the protection of our embassies, and we proved that in Benghazi.
Well, you're absolutely right. And the problem with closing 21 of our embassies throughout the Islamic world is that essentially, without anything else taking place, without a single bullet being fired by Al-Qaeda, is a huge victory for the terrorists. Remember, the Islamic terrorists, their goal was to reduce American or eliminate American influence in the Middle East and in the Islamic world. They have done that to a great extent. When we close our embassies out of fear, that's a huge success for the terrorists.
Yeah, no question about it. No question about it. And it's interesting. So why is the media treating one so harshly and the other so gently?
Because I believe the media is invested in President Obama. Early on, the treatment of President Obama in the 2008 election, this was the media's guide. Just about every survey we've seen says that by a 75 to 25% margin, people in journalism favored President Obama. To admit that President Obama is wrong is to admit that they were wrong. And we all know, of course, that the New York Times, CBS, NBC, ABC could never be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. In spite of the fact that they've actually been a target to some of Obama's misdeeds.
Yeah, that story seems to have gone off the front pages rather quickly. I mean, one would think that would have been something that would have had legs for weeks and months, if not years. Certainly, if another president had done it, that president would now be facing impeachment hearings. But for President Obama, nothing like that at all seems to be in the offing.
Very good stuff. Always enjoy having you on, Frank. Again, give your website so people can get more information.
It's USA Gov Policy. That's USAGOVpolicy.com. And if any of your listeners would like a free subscription to our weekly newsletter, they can get it by simply sending their email to usgovpolicy@gmail.com.
Frank Vernuccio, check him out. Thanks for being with us, as always.
Great being with you. Thank you.
All right, when we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here. It shows up over there at usdailyreview.com. While there, like it on Facebook. Follow it on Twitter.